I'm going to break down what it actually costs to get to MotoGP. From what it cost in the 1980s, to what it cost me and my family in 2011, to what it would cost today. But this isn't just about money, because I also wanted to understand what young riders go through, mentally, physically, and just how much it takes at such a young age to even have a chance. There are academies, talent cups, and a whole pathway put in place now to try to help riders make it to MotoGP. But in the 1980s, that looked very different. My dad was part of that world, and somehow he made it all the way from sunny Scotland to race in the 500cc Grand Prix class, which is now called MotoGP.
So I started motorcycle racing in 1981. One day I was standing at the side of the track, and I don't know whether it was an epiphany or whatever, but I just thought, I think I could do that. And why I thought that I'll never know, but I was 18, 19 and up for anything, so I just thought I'd have a go. There was no definite path, it was just a case of doing whatever you could, but I really feel if you were determined enough, you could certainly give yourself a good chance. In the 1980s, there wasn't really a system for riders to get to MotoGP. Riders appeared from all sorts of backgrounds. I was working as a labourer for the electricity company digging holes, and I was taking home about £90 a week. So including buying my bike, which was 1,086 quid at the time, and then to go racing, it was maximum 70 to 100 pounds a weekend because I didn't have any transport costs. It was entry fees, fuel. Yeah, maybe in a whole season I would spend my wages, which would be 1,500 quid or maybe 2,000 pounds. But also, weirdly, in Scotland there was prize money, so you would get a little bit back when you won as well. So it was very affordable on a very normal working wage. At Knockhill in 1981, if you won both 500 production races, you get £50 each for the normal races, and then there was a race at the end which was a free-for-all with all bikes called the invitation race, and you get £70 for that. So I could take home £170, which is ridiculous. I could actually make a profit club racing. That's where things begin to differ so much already to the current day. Before my dad had arrived in MotoGP, he spent £11,200 going club racing. The facts are that it was possible. You can't do it on a working man's wage today, that's for sure, but it certainly was possible back then. And if you were good enough to get breaks like I did, then it proved that you could make your way up the ladder. So after starting racing in 1981, by 1983 my dad was already a professional racer. So in 1981 I was digging holes in Scotland and actually quite happy with life. In 1987 I was sitting in pole position at Suzuka with a 2-year Honda factory contract, which is just mad. In 1981, including his bike, my dad spent £3,500 to go racing, but he won £400 in prize money. In 1982, he spent £6,500, but he got the loan of a van, £1,000 sponsorship and £1,200 in prize money. By 1983, him and my grandma took out a loan as they were expecting to pay £14,500 that year. Luckily for my dad, due to his good results, he was actually picked up by the official Armstrong team very early in the season, so he was able to sell his bike and van and pay back the loan. After winning a further £2,700 in prize money, he only ended up spending £3,800 that year. Across those first 3 years, he spent around £11,200. But by 1984, it flipped. He became a professional rider, earning £3,000 in wages plus £3,500 in prize money. And by 1987, his first salary in MotoGP was £100,000 a year with £60,000 in bonuses. Jean-Michel Bayle famously jumped from motocross one season to racing in the Grand Prix paddock the next. But stories like those are completely unheard of now. The chaotic world that my dad started racing in was beginning to turn into something much more structured. But by the time I'd started racing, that world was already changing. The sport was starting to build a ladder. Today's video is sponsored by Raycon. I've been using Raycon's bone conduction headphones in the gym and on walks recently while trying to sort the dad bod out, and they've been ideal for that. I like having something on, whether it's music or a podcast, but I don't always want to feel completely cut off from what's going on around me. Raycon's bone conduction headphones sit just outside your ears and use off-ear audio, so they send sound through vibrations in your bones. So your ears stay open to the world around you, but you still get really clear music, podcasts or calls. They're perfect if you're trying to stay active. I've used them on walks and in the gym, and it's nice being able to stay aware of things like traffic or people around you whilst you're still listening to something. They've got around 13 hours of battery life, they're waterproof and they're lightweight and comfortable. So they're easy to wear as part of your routine without them slipping or getting in the way. If you're looking for a thoughtful gift idea, whether that's for Mother's Day or just someone in your life who likes staying active, these are a really good option.
and I know we've got some viewers in the US as well, so with Mother's Day coming up over there, it could be a perfect gift for that too. What I like the most though is you're getting really solid quality without paying premium prices. There's already over 3 million people using Raycon, and they come with a 30-day happiness guarantee as well. If you want to check them out, go to buyraycon.com/Taylor Mackenzie BC to get 15% off. It also really helps support this channel, so I appreciate it. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring the video. Growing up around racing, I definitely had access to the paddock and a head start that most kids don't have. But even with that, MotoGP is an entirely different challenge. One thing that made my journey a little bit different was I started relatively late. Relatively late being 13 years old. Because in motorcycle racing now, the clock starts ticking very early. And if you start racing later, you have to move incredibly fast to try and catch up.
But my dad's always been into MotoGP and Formula 1. It was always on the TV growing up. I used to have like a little bike you should just razz around out on the street, and then I always used to sit on it, and my dad was like, when you can reach the foot pegs, you can go on the back with me. And when I was 6, I was finally tall enough, and so that's how it started from there.
I always rode bikes when I was younger, but I didn't actually start racing until I was 13. For contrast, Marc Marquez and Jorge Lorenzo had already competed in their first Grand Prix by the time they were 15. As a family, I actually remembered my dad when I was younger wondering if there was any point in us even starting racing. He'd seen in magazines that Scott Redding had already been in Spain from the age of 7, but if I'm honest, we never actually had any aspirations of becoming motorbike racers. We just went along because we really enjoyed motorbikes and really enjoyed racing. But before we knew it, I was up and down the country every single weekend getting enough signatures on my licence to fast track the process so I could race in British Championship. But before we go any further, I think it's important to talk about the cost so far, and I don't think there's any man more qualified for that job than to ask my dad.
So the good thing is I know what it costs to go racing because I was that man and I was Scottish and I was counting it up. First year we were in mini motos, and okay, we got a bit of a help from my good friend Alan McIntosh in Scotland. He supplied me with a little Pellini bike. But for every race you've got fuel costs, you've got spares, you've got to get to the meetings, sometimes accommodations. So over the season we did about 10 races, and that worked out about £500 a race, so you're £5,000 for a season in mini motos, which was great fun.
I only did one season in mini motos in 2006, and before I knew it in 2007 I was racing on big bikes around the UK.
Unfortunately the costs still ramp up after that. The next season we went to Aprilia Super Teens, so it pretty much doubles. You got to buy the bike in the first place, but you're basically £1,000 a meeting. That's spares, tyres, entry fees. You've also got to get a van at this point, so you're getting a few assets along the way, but it's still quite costly. So your £10,000 plus all your little bits and pieces that you own end of the season, that's Aprilia Super Teens.
It goes up really quick. I remember when we bought my first mini moto, it was £400 second hand, and we had to pick it up from Leicester. My mum was like, £400 on a bike, on a hobby. And when you start going up the ranks, your metric kit, I think £2,000 to £4,000 at the time, and then it goes up. Then we went to Super Teens RS125, and I think that was around £10,000 a year. And then you go to what is now the British Talent Cup. It was called Motorstar in my day, and I think you're looking at around £20,000 to £30,000. If you didn't crash as well.
The next year is 2008, and by this time we went to the British Championship, to the 125 British Championship. This gets more expensive. That's £12,000 for a season, but we also needed a caravan. We just had to run the van. Spares and tyres are a lot more expensive, so it does ramp up. So you're talking up to maybe £15,000 for a season racing.
In my second year of racing, I actually attended the Red Bull Rookie tryout. I was lucky enough to get picked in 2008 for the Red Bull Rookie Cup. If you haven't heard of it before, the Red Bull Rookies started in 2007, and it's the equivalent of the X Factor for motorbikes for kids. Anyone that's been racing can apply for it, and every year over 100 riders are invited to a selection event in Europe. And if you're fast enough, normally 10 of those are then chosen for the Red Bull Rookie Cup the following season. I was lucky enough in 2008 to get picked for the 2009 and 2010 seasons in Red Bull Rookies. And let me tell you, as a teenager, there was nothing more exciting than knowing that you were going to race in that championship the following season. So how does it work? Well, basically once you're selected, you then get a 3 seasons racing in the Red Bull Rookies Cup the following season. All you have to do is provide a mechanic helper, which is normally the rider's dad, that comes along with them to clean the wheels and change the fairings. Everything else is provided for you, and all you have to do is get yourself to and from each race.
Yeah, the Red Bull Rookies Cup is amazing because it's the first chance you get to ride at the world stage with the world's best riders that are in your age group. It's quite a culture shock really when you first get there.
And this is where things can change drastically. If you're good enough to have been selected for the Red Bull Rookie Cup and you're from the UK or Asia, it's likely that you're also good enough to be selected for the talent team. The talent team rides in the European Talent Cup and the Junior GP Championship. At this point, MotoGP are investing in your future because they don't want you to miss out if you couldn't afford it.
2022 was a brilliant year for me. I was quite a good winner throughout the British Talent Cup 2022 season. I won that championship that year. And I was also racing out in the European Talent Cup, which gave me a very good boost for me when I came back home. I had a little bit more experience than the other boys back then, because obviously I was racing out in Europe. But so yeah, I won the 2022 British Talent Cup, and I was also fighting mid-pack, obviously learning big bits in the European Talent Cup, which is where I got most of my speed from. And then yeah, I won that 2022 British Talent Cup championship that year, and yeah, that was an amazing year for me. I was loving life. I was winning the championship, and I was really looking forward to racing next year in 2023, which I was going to be racing a European Talent Cup, which I was really looking forward to. But then that's when the accident happened, which was quite unfortunate.
And if I'm honest, if you're winning the Rookies Cup or the Junior GP Championship, the chances are that your ride in Moto3 the following season would definitely be free, but if not, you'd be getting paid to race in the championship, which changes absolutely everything. If you look at Pedro Acosta, he finished second in his first season in the Red Bull Rookies Cup. The following season he won it. He advanced to Moto3 at age 17, won the Moto3 Championship in his first season in there, and before he knew it, he was in the Moto2 class. So it is actually possible to arrive in Moto2 having spent considerably less. But the golden ticket doesn't come that often, and there's no guarantees of it getting you all the way to MotoGP. And if we fast forward the next 3 years, from 2008 to 2010, I started winning races around the UK.
We took another step up, this time with a very professional team, Mark Keen's KRP team, and we did this because we thought we were at a level where we really could run at the front and win races and be in competition for the 125 British Championship. It was a case of spending everything we could, so we did all the British Championship. We also did 3 what is now the Junior World Championship races in Spain, and we did 2 GPs. Total cost £35,000, but that was money we're not getting back. That said, it was job done because we were given an opportunity for the following years to race in the 125 World Championship.
Suddenly, from riding mini motos just a few years ago, I was lined up on the grid against riders like Maverick Vinales, Alex Rins and Alex Marquez, who are all now racing in the MotoGP class.
And this is when it gets really serious. We were given an opportunity which has got a value. Not everyone gets the opportunity, but it comes at a cost. Luckily, we had some sponsors that got on board, 3 major sponsors that helped us out, but the cost just for the ride was £150,000, and that's what we had to find. So we didn't remortgage the house. We were very grateful to the sponsors that helped us, and there was expenses on top of that. We still had to get to the races, we had to get to Australia, we had to get to Malaysia, but that was the total cost, and that was for an uncompetitive ride. In some ways we achieved our goal, we got there. It's impossible to keep spending that money every year, so we did our best, but we arrived for a season and justified being in the 125 World Championship.
Added to all these facts, if you compare me to the best of the best, I'm already 3 years too late at this point. I arrived in World Championship at 18, when Jorge Lorenzo and Marc Marquez arrived in MotoGP at the age of 20. In my second Grand Prix, I finished in 5th position in the wet in Jerez. And looking back, if I'm honest, that was the end of my MotoGP journey. This isn't a poor me story or my excuses, but the reality was, at the very next race, I high-sided and separated the cartilage of my shoulder. I then went on to have a load of mechanical problems, and my poor results as a result of those meant that that was the end of my MotoGP journey. And before I knew it, I was back in the British Supersport class the following season. It's important to say that although I didn't make it to MotoGP, I then went on to have a career in motorcycle racing. I won a British Championship, and I actually went back to manage a team in the Moto3 class in 2022 and 23. So although I didn't make it to MotoGP, I've had an amazing life from this sport, and I'm forever grateful for my sponsors and my family and believing in me all that time ago.
You can never be comfortable because it's the selection event that you enter for the Rookies Cup kind of stays with you, and I felt as though you're kind of always being looked at, always being judged, both on paper and as you are as a person. As you can never be too safe because the guys at Dorna don't tell you much. They keep the cards really close to their chest, and it's only until that meeting at the end of the year and they tell you whether you're in or you're out, and it's as simple as that really. So probably one of my downfalls is that in 2020 I performed really well that year. I progressed, I improved every single time, and I think I finished the championship as top junior talent team rider. I would have been the next up and coming Brit into GPs. It was only my second year. I broke my pelvis halfway through as well and still got back for the next round because I was, you have to take the opportunity with both hands and do everything you can. And I still performed really well. I remember I finished 5th with a broken pelvis, and at that time that was the best result a Brit's ever got in junior GP. And I remember Anna and Carmela Espeleta were on the phone saying well done, all this stuff, and really, really good stuff. And at that point I kind of thought I was safe for another year, especially like with COVID, because our season got affected. We kind of only got half a year, and then it was late November and you get called into that meeting, and I kind of went in there thinking I could be progressed up. There was a few rumours that I could have been moved up. At 99% I thought I was going to stay for another year. And Anna, she just said, sorry Max, you're a tough kid, but you got nothing we can do for you. And at that point I just could not believe it. It was like my world just fell apart really, because I didn't expect that answer at all. Looking back, I think everything happens for a reason, and it couldn't have worked out much better now. But at that moment in time, it was really, really hard.
As you can see, the road to MotoGP isn't exactly a straight road, and unfortunately, no one knows that more than Johnny Garness. And talk me through it. So at that point, you've won the British Talent Cup. You're then, in my mind, that's what the golden ticket is. You're then on this path where the road to MotoGP start looking after you. So would you have been picked for the talent team then? Is that what would happen next?
Yes, so I was going to race for the Michael Laverty junior talent team at the time. It was on the Vision track I was racing for. Obviously they're not the sponsor anymore. So I would have moved up to them with Dorna, racing for the talent team, and they would have brought me through the stages as an amazing team. They would have brought me up. I've already been with them through the British Talent Cup and the European Talent Cup, and they bring me up through the stages as on the road to MotoGP, and would be racing in the Moto3 Junior Championship, and then when I'm ready from that to go up into the World Championships, that's when. So that was the path I was on, but then unfortunately, and the start of 2023 season, we were testing out in Portugal before the season started, and I come off on one of the fast corners, and as I was on the floor getting off of the track, another rider came flying past and hit me straight in the back of the head whilst I was on the floor, and broke the skull, broke the top of my neck, broke C1, C2 vertebrae in my neck, and done lower spine damage and bleeding on the brain damage. So I got pretty messed up in the accident, and I was obviously very upset because I was looking forward to doing that season. And well, I didn't really think that would be the end of it for these next couple of years. I never thought that through. And well, let's say life without racing now, I do miss it tragically. Like, it was like such a big part of my life. I've done it since I was very, very young age.
I think you can begin to see, even with immense talent on your side and fantastic people around you, there's still no guarantees when it comes to trying to make it to MotoGP. But the world has changed a lot in recent years. I want to add up what it would cost in 2026 to get there. I should start this section by saying that if you are good enough to make it to MotoGP, the road to MotoGP will more than likely have found you, and it wouldn't cost you this frightening number I'm about to add up. 20 of the current 26 Moto3 riders are ex-Red Bull rookies, and 11 of the 22 current MotoGP riders are also Red Bull rookies, so the majority of the riders on the grid today have had some form of help to get them there. But there are a few exceptions to that get there without any help. So what would it cost today to navigate the path of snakes and ladders without any form of golden ticket or strokes of luck? There's a clear, structured path that a parent needs to make a conscious decision to put their child on from more or less 3 years old. And with it, the birth of what is now known as the road to MotoGP. So what does that journey look like today? Well, firstly, if we haven't already, at the age of 3 years old, we need to get them on something like a kiddie moto. This is a balance bike that the child can practice balancing on, hold the handlebars and get a feel for what a bike feels like. We may as well get a counter going now, so we'll put this down at £129. Once we've advanced from a kiddie moto, it's time for a bit of engine noise. And the normal route that MotoGP racers take is buying a Yamaha PW50. If I'm being really optimistic, we've spent less than £1,000 so far. We managed to get a deal on a PW50 and all we've done is taken it to some fields to ride it round and round and get a feel for what that's like. By age 5, if I'm being completely honest, it would make more sense to uproot your whole family and take them to Spain, because this is where things have changed drastically from where I've started racing. When I started racing, a trip to Spain was a complete luxury. I remember at age 14 or 15 years old, it was the first time I rode a motorbike in Spain. We went for a 3-day test in Cartagena and it felt like an ultimate luxury. But the reality is these days, kids in Spain are riding motorbikes most days after school. And if you're not there, there can be an overwhelming feeling that you're already falling behind. But to keep things simpler, I'm going to leave out life and travel costs and just imagine that you're going to continue living in the UK for the following years. And I just want to put rough figures on the racing costs that you would have. The first step on the MotoGP ladder is the FIM Moto Mini Series. And at age 6, we're going to buy a Mini Moto, as that's the age that you can start racing them in the UK. I reached out on my Instagram to parents that are currently racing in the UK either on mini motos or ovales. If you don't know what an ovale is, it's basically a mini GP bike that's designed and built for kids to start racing on. And on average, all parents said they were spending between £3,000 and £10,000 for the year's racing. The first year there was obviously a lot more setup costs between buying the bike for around £3,500, the leathers, helmet, boots were around £1,000, you needed spares, which were between £1,000 and £2,000, and then the inevitable £40 to £70 for a training session. But that doesn't include your entry fees, which are £240 for a race weekend, including the practice. So by the end of the season, when you've done 7 or 8 races, you're getting on for £1,700–1,800 in entry fees. If you didn't already have a van, you're probably going to need to get one at this point to ship your bikes to and from the circuits. Most families at this stage also invest in a caravan or a motorhome, as it can be cheaper than buying hotels in the long run over the coming seasons. With food and travel costs, you can see how this quickly starts mounting up, and the figures of £3,000 to £10,000 seem very realistic. But this is just a bare minimum to buy a bike and go racing. And I have to say, I got an overwhelming feeling from parents that they felt guilty that their child was missing out by not being in Spain or not doing enough practice sessions or not getting to enough race meetings. I know of one youngster that did over 52 flights just in one season before they were age 14, getting to and from Europe. So from the ages of 6 to 13, we've now arrived at a grand total of £57,129. But now if we've been the standout rider in our national championship, we can attend the grand final at the end of the year. It's important to point out that there's 24 national championships around the world that feed into this grand final. We can now compete in the Moto Mini World Series. So this is the first time you can pit yourself against the world's best at a world final. On a 160cc bike if you're 10 to 14, or a 190 if you're 12 to 16. To keep kids safer, they've upped the minimum age limit of kids racing in different series around the world, which although it's great for safety, unfortunately does elongate the time that a parent has to look after their child in the racing world. In previous seasons, if you imagine Jorge Lorenzo was in the Grand Prix class at 15, Marc Marquez was in Grand Prix by 15, at this point they're more or less becoming professional racers that are then fed into all these different championships. Generally speaking, the minimum age that a rider can arrive in the Moto3 class is now 18 years old. But the next step on the ladder is the Talent Cups. You've got the Moto4 British, Asia, Latin and Northern Talent Cups. I can't speak for the other national championships, but depending if you're doing it yourself or you're riding for a team, in the British Talent Cup, you're likely to be spending between £25,000 and £35,000 for a season's racing. Let's say age 14, we're still doing well, and in the Moto4 Championship, we spent £30,000 for our season's racing. That puts our total to £87,129. At age 15, we're going to step up to the European Talent Cup. The European Talent Cup is the next feeder class on this road to MotoGP, and this is where things start to get really expensive. I've heard of lots of varying different prices for rides, but a rough estimate in a good team is around £100,000 for a season's racing. So by age 15, our total is £187,129. Things have gone exceptionally well, and one season in the European Talent Cup has led us to getting into the Junior GP class, which is the next step on the road to MotoGP ladder. Now if we rewind to my racing, when I raced in the Spanish Championship class, which is now called the Junior GP class, I could do a wildcard race for around £4,000 for a weekend's racing. For a rider now to race in that championship in one of the most competitive teams in the class, they're going to spend around £200,000 for a season's racing. Due to the nature of the new age limits in this class, it means we now need to race in the Junior GP class age 16 and 17, which for those 2 years now puts our total to £587,129. But finally, we've made it to age 18 where we can race in the Moto3 Championship. Having seen it firsthand, I know there's a varying figure that riders will pay for their first season in Moto3 now. So let's say in the worst case we had to buy our ride in Moto3 for £350,000. That now puts our total to £937,129 to get to Moto3. But with your child at age 18 as a parent, you're nervous about just letting them stomp around the world by themselves for a season. Because although a Moto3 team will aim to help your child as they travel around the world, at the end of the day it's not a child-minding service. They're there to provide a service for your child to go racing. So in an ideal world, the parent will actually travel with the child for a season too. And between getting a hire car, a hotel and flights for the weekend, you're going to be looking at £1,000 a weekend on average for the 22 races across the season. So that's another £22,000 on your budget for the year. At this point, if we're not performing well, in all honesty it's unlikely that you'll get a second year in Moto3 anyway. But having said that, a lot of MotoGP racers didn't actually perform in their first season in Moto3. Alex Marquez had 3 seasons in Moto3 and Brad Binder actually had 6 seasons before he advanced to the Moto2 class. But let's say we did do enough and the team want to keep us on for a second season. We're going to be looking at another £350,000 to keep ourselves in the championship. But for our second season in Moto3, that puts our total to £1,312,129 for our shot at trying to make it to MotoGP. So by 2026, for most riders, that dream to get to MotoGP has become incredibly expensive. Because there are only 22 slots on the MotoGP grid every season, but behind every one of those is a journey that started 20 years earlier and eliminated thousands of kids along the way.
The dream is GP, it always has been, and I think it always will be, And I had no idea what I was going to do. I was super lucky. I've got long-term sponsors. I've got Nigel, FS3, I've got a sponsor Neil, Royal Palm Tenerife, and Motorsports Travel. They were my real big sponsors at that time, and they stayed with me through that. And I phoned Danny Webb straight away to see if he knew anybody who could get me a ride in a team, but everything was taken. And then I was so lucky that Nigel was able to buy me a Kawasaki 600 and could enter me into the stock 600 class just for a year, just so I had something just to put my name into BSB paddock. It's quite a tough one because you've gone from everything being given to you, Dorna paying for everything, you just kind of live almost rock star lifestyle. Everything was paid for. Here's your flights, here's your hotel, just turn up, ride this unreal bike kind of thing. Everything was almost too good to be true. Whereas this, I had to learn how to do mechanics and kind of do little bits and bobs and change my wheels, and buy a toolbox and like actual kind of grown-up stuff which I've not had to do before. Looking back, it was probably the best character building and best year that has happened to me. But at that point, it was tough to keep moving on. You kind of got a lot of self-doubt and you kind of feel like you're on rock bottom, and then you start winning again, and then it all comes back. Then the love for racing comes back, and you smile just talking about it, really, because that year really has changed my life into how it is now. Obviously, when you do think it's all doom and gloom, that season of the Junior Worlds is going to help you so much to become a better rider, that you still got it. So when I did come back to BSB, the amount of skills that I learned, data feeding back, that I learned to deal with my crew chief, it was all a huge strong point for me, and I managed to start winning. And then Nigel gave me the opportunity to ride Superbike in 23. So my goals right now is to win BSB. That's the goal now. Because then to win BSB, then we have it really good here where you can stay, you know, a bit like what Kyle's doing. You can make a living out of racing a motorbike, which is obviously a dream come true in itself. But the inner 9-year-old Max wants to go to World Championship. Whether if that's World Superbike or maybe even MotoGP one day. But that's the goal.
And if you had any advice for parents or kids starting today or that are on the road to MotoGP, what would it be?
If you want to go racing, go racing. It is amazing. Actually, entry level, whether your child's 6 years old or 10-year-old, the entry level is still very affordable. You can chuck mini motos in the boot of your car and go racing and have a lot of fun, and it can be a family sport. You'll meet lots of lovely people, you'll meet lots of other kids, and everyone's got the same intention. However, if you want to go all the way, then you are going to be spending a lot of money. You'll need to find sponsors, you'll need to tick every box. All the information is out there as to how you prepare, what bikes you need, where to go. It's all there, but it comes at a cost. It's difficult to find sponsors when you're young or till your kid's established, but you just got to do everything you possibly can. You can go all the way through to the British Superbike paddock in the junior classes, and if you're not planning on trying to be the next Marc Marquez, then you can probably get by at a reasonable level. But if you feel like you want to go all the way, and that's winning the British Talent Cup and then getting to the Junior World Championship and Moto 3, then you really have to going to commit all your time, all your money, find sponsors. Your child has to tick all the boxes, have to do everything. It's going to be horrendously expensive, quite heartbreaking at times, but there are families and kids out there that are going to make their way through. It's just a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive than it's ever been.
Not only be fast, but be the full package and listen to everything that they say and don't mess around. Yeah.
And that's why MotoGP is almost impossible to reach. Almost. But that's what makes it so special. Make sure you hit subscribe and like the video, and if you're on the road to MotoGP, I'll see you there very soon.